What I've got here is a very nice quality, although very old, probably 60s, Powr-Kraft. Well, they don't really give horsepower on it, but it's 6 amps, so you can probably calculate it what 6 amps would be. The router itself is an 8542A. It's a modular router. This head lifts out and the base itself is separate. And what I plan on doing is putting bearings in it. It's a pretty good router, and there is no need to just chunk it. It's a higher quality router than I can afford to buy right now, and it's a decent size, sort of halfway in between my larger and somewhat crappy 2-horse Craftsman and my laminate router. Anyways, but let me turn it on here and you can see why it needs a rebuild. It's ugly. I'm going to start by pulling this top cover off, which is all aluminum. It's one of the reasons why I'm really looking at fixing this. You just don't see many all aluminum routers anymore. Okay, so there is our switch, which is actually a legitimate ball switch. Armature does not look too badly burned. So what I'm going to do, I'll pull the switch assembly apart, I'll pull the brushes out, put it all in a nice plastic bag, keep everything together, and try to get farther down in there to look at those bearings. So that's got her apart. The armature's beat up a little. Bearings are definitely trashed. And unfortunately, the brushes are pretty badly wore out too. Though they look pretty darn standard. I seem to think I might have some that are about that size. So I'll dig through my stuff, otherwise I bet I can easily get replacements. Kinda all comes down to what that armature looks like when I get it out, whether it can be polished, and how bad the rest of it is. Oh, it is so very bad. That bearing. The armature looks burned, but it doesn't. God, listen to that thing. It even jams. It doesn't appear to be too badly scored. So my guess is it's probably simply been walking around with the bad bearing. Listen to him. It's just been walking around, so that's what's causing these burning. I can probably clean that up. And so there's the top end bearing. It's really important when you pull these that you don't mess up that fan, and it's easy to do. I don't have a very good puller for these, so I'm attempting to press it out. Oh, there she went. That's my girl. And catch it all at the same time. So now for the top one. I am not a super big fan of this. It doesn't fit in there quite right. There it went. Oh, we're going to be fine. Easy peasy. And there they are apart. It's a US made Norma, N-O-R-M-A, never heard of that, 9013 double D. That would be the top bearing. And the bottom bearing is actually cracked in the race, and it is another US made ND CWC 87008. I'd say that's been replaced. So now it's just a matter of ordering these in, putting the rest of the parts someplace where they'll stay safe, and coming back to it when it's ready. The armature isn't super bad. It's had a lot of hours, but it's still savable. What I want to do is remove this glazing, and a lot of that is because as that top bearing failed, it sort of allowed the armature to wobble around in a circle. So I've got it chucked up into the drill press gently. We'll simply spin it up, and then this is 220 sandpaper, and it's used 220 sandpaper. And there she is, bright, shiny, and hopefully ready to do some more work. When it came to replacing the top bearing, and this is the bearing that actually failed, that feels like it's got gravel in it. I wasn't able to find precisely the same kind, and so what I ended up with was one that is shielded on one side and sealed on the other. Now, for the most part, the days of bearings failing because the seals couldn't handle the high speeds in routers, it's basically over. All of your modern routers, for the most part, are going to have sealed bearings. So it doesn't necessarily bother me that much that I have a sealed bearing on the other side. It'll survive. So what I'm going to do is when I install it, I'm going to put the shield down and the seal up, thus minimizing as much as possible entrance of crap into the bearing. In order to put it back together, I found a deep well socket. Fits over. You want to make sure you're hammering only on the inner race. This shouldn't take a lot of effort. If it takes a lot of effort, something's wrong. Go ahead and stop. You'll hear the sound change when you bottom out properly. Make sure obviously that you've got top and bottom at bottom. And again, I can't stress enough, you should not need to wail on this. It should just be lots of light taps. But make sure you do this on a piece of wood so that you don't mess up either end, because if you do, it's over. Once again, deep well socket, light taps. Okay, the sound change. Bearings bottom. There you go. Good as new. Now you just put it back together. The way this particular router works, and one of the reasons I'm taking the time to rebuild it, is even though you've got a top bearing, it also has a second bronze sleeve. So on this, I'm going to want to take very fine emery paper, steel wool, get the crusties off, and then a dab of grease right there. I think in normal operation, that bronze bushing doesn't actually touch much of anything. But when this bearing failed, it's that bronze bushing that kept this router from exploding. Start by inserting the motor shaft through the motor. Make sure it's, if you can, seated all the way down. I don't like tapping it into the top bearing cup. Usually you can push them into the top bearing cup. If you have to tap a little, make sure it is just a little, because you're tapping through bearings at this point, which is hard on them. Most times, if you can't push them in, you can use your screws to tighten them in. So I'm going to go ahead and put the bottom one on. That's so as I work on the brushes, I don't have the whole thing slipping out and have to start over. Snug them up in a crisscross pattern, then go back and tighten down. So, now the guts of the router have been repaired. Everything. One of the most frustrating parts of a motor rebuild like this can be getting the brushes and their brush holders back in and working properly. So there is kind of an easy trick. Just about every single brush holder is going to have a hole like that in there somewhere. Now these brushes are worn and I wasn't able to find any, so hopefully they will continue working. But if you take it, that's not going to work. And you can push the end of the brush past that hole. Then what I do is I insert something, usually a piece of wire, and now that brush is held captive in place. You go ahead and install it in the motor, give this a tug, brush snaps out, you're golden. And that's usually way easier than attempting to fit everything in there, hold it down, get your screws started and tightened. Every tool is different. You'll have to check to see if yours has a right and a left. This one does not have a right and a left. The brushes slip down in over the top of a tab in there. Then this metal piece, which is a spring clamp, slips over the top. There, we got it. So the brush is in its holder. Spring clip is torqued down, and so now, I'm sure you heard that click. I just pulled that loose. The brush extends up against the armature, and you're already all set. So it's just a matter of doing that for the other side, then going back and checking that everything is snug. Now both brushes are in. So you just go ahead and attach your brush wires. And here again, you want to, sometimes they go over, sometimes one goes over, one goes under. You do want to look at your available space, make sure your wires are not going to be twisted or crimped or any other bad possibility. Really want to make sure they can't possibly rub on the armature. Alright. So, basically at this point, we're ready for a test run to see how she sounds. I'll go ahead and cut to a shot of what it used to sound like. And now, what it sounds like after. It's not even the same thing. One of the neat things about this old router is it has an integrated spindle lock there. So this bar, in order to engage it, obviously you have to twist the bottom until she snaps in place, but this bar goes ahead and turns it off. And so in order to turn it back on, the bar slides in, it drops down, and then you can turn it sideways, and that's when it turns the machine on. And then it turns the machine off and springs back out again. Okay, so there is the mechanism. It slips in right there, comes back in, and it goes behind this bar right here. And that works, I'm trying to keep it from flying off, that works not only to hold this down, and that's why you actually have to pull your lever down, but it also works to kick that lever forward. Whoa, don't come off. So you see the spring wants to flick it forward when it turns around and stops for lock. In order to start it, you got to push it back. and then that's running. That's off, and then once the machine comes to a halt, you simply touch this lever, it pops up, slaps forward, there you go. It's pretty ingenious for 50 years old. There she is, all done. In, over. I got her on the first try. So that's how it works. Now the spindle's locked and you can go ahead and loosen the collet. So, you know, I guarantee you this machine was worth rebuilding. Absolutely guarantee it. It is so much nicer and smoother than the modern stuff, which is really what I've found, and it's why I run so much of this older equipment that I've pieced back together. So, if you see one of these at a yard sale, even if she sounds like corn chips, my gosh, probably pick it up. And I know I'll need to put new brushes in it eventually, and I'll go ahead and try to find those a second time. But nice locking depth ring. It's a good machine. Hopefully you're as successful with your own. It's really nice and it's rewarding to bring some of this old hard cased aluminum stuff back to life, and I think you'll find that they will operate in your wood shop as good, if not better, than the lower end modern stuff. Obviously this will never be as nice as a variable speed $300 router, but I didn't pay $300 for it. I've got 25 in it, and I guarantee you it's better than a $150 plastic router. Good luck. Thanks for watching.